For people who are not familiar with you and your work, would you give us a quick rundown of who you are and what you do?
Sure. So I'm born and raised in New York. I moved to Israel with my family 30 years ago. And for the past 15 or so years, I've been working in the Israeli tech ecosystem, which has become famous because Israel is this tiny little country leading the world in innovation. Unfortunately, 7.5 years ago, my older brother, Ari Fuld, was murdered in a terrorist attack. And that kind of pulled me into the conflict. But then on October 7th, I threw away that mask and shut down my business, focused all my resources and my time on fighting for Israel online and leveraging my network, which is both large but also unique in that my audience, I would say, is predominantly anti-Israel, but they trust me because I built that trust over many years. And that's what I've been doing since October 7th. And my work on social has reached now 4 billion impressions.
You successfully, or I guess, I don't know if you planned it that way, but you predicted October 7th would happen about 2 days before it happened, from what I understand. What led you to believe that there was an attack imminent on Israel back then?
I wouldn't say I predicted October 7th, but I definitely took a look at the geopolitics that was happening between America and Iran, America and China, Russia and Ukraine, internal politics and crazy division, both in the United States and in Israel. And I wrote, if you're paying attention and you don't think something big is about to happen, you're not paying attention. And I wrote in the post, Israel will be at the center of it. I felt something big was coming. I did feel that in my bones. And the next time I felt anything in my bones that way was recently, looking at the anti-Semitism, the events unfold around the world. And I wrote 2 weeks ago, I hope I'm wrong, and I really do hope and pray that I'm wrong, but just looking at the data and looking at the trajectory and looking at the direction that we're seeing in terms of anti-Semitism, it seems to me that we can expect to see, unfortunately, and again, I hope I'm wrong, a large-scale mass casualty terror attack against Jews in a Jewish center somewhere in the United States or maybe in Europe. If you look at what's going on right now, I have a great aunt who's a survivor of the Holocaust. She went through 3 death camps. And when I interviewed her, I asked her, comparing what today around the world to what you experienced pre-Holocaust, how do you compare them? And she said 2 words. She said the same. It's hard to believe this is happening, but we're watching it unfold. And unfortunately, I'm getting an answer to a question I had my entire life, which is, why didn't the German Jews leave? Didn't they see the writing on the wall? And I didn't know an answer to that question my whole life. And now I do, because I'm speaking to my friends around the world. They're seeing what's happening and they're staying put and saying, it doesn't affect me. I'm going to stay here. And I say to them, I don't understand. If you had a gun to your head, would you not get on a plane? Yeah, of course I would. But what constitutes a gun if what's happening now doesn't constitute a gun?
Every single day now, we're seeing more anti-Semitic attacks that just in the United States are up over 800% from the last article I read. And 70% of the hate crimes that take place in the United States take place against Jews, and just a tiny fraction of our population. And Jews are not, by and large, aggressive, hateful people. What do you think it is that makes the world so just rabid about Jews? It's because of the reaction to 10/7, that what's happening in Gaza, but it's way deeper than that. It didn't start on the 22nd of October when you guys went into Gaza. It started thousands of years ago, and it's been going on you can see it throughout history. Why is it that Jews just seem to be this target all the time for so much opprobrium?
It's a great question. That's a question that I think most people have asked themselves their entire life. Why do they hate us? And I can say one thing. Anybody who thinks that the anti-Semitism we're seeing today is because of the state of Israel, they're getting it wrong. The state of Israel exists because of the anti-Semitism. Let's not forget, when the state of Israel was established, it was after 6 million Jews were butchered, just unprovoked and for no reason other than Jew hatred. So let's just not forget history. I can tell you my theory. I firmly believe this. And that is, if you look throughout history, you look at the script, it keeps repeating itself. And here's the script. There's an empire, okay? And this empire begins to grow. And then it grows to a level of world dominance and unparalleled power and influence. The first thing that empire does over and over again is it throws morality out the window. It puts people to fight to the death in the Colosseum for the emperor's entertainment. And it just forgets all about morality. Now, when it forgets about morality, it says, I don't want morality shoved down my throat. So let's find out what the source of morality was. The answer is the Bible. This isn't a supremacist statement. This is a factual statement. The way the world knows that it is immoral to murder is from the Bible. So the Bible brought morality to the world. Now, these empires, when they want to go after morality, they can't go after the creator of the Bible, right? So they come after the messenger, right? They come after the Jews and they say, listen, we don't want your thou shalt not murder garbage. We don't want your thou shall not steal and covet and lie. We don't want that. We're right now today a Western civilization that's dominating the world and will decide what's true and what's not true. And that's what happens. And then unfortunately, the next stage, and again, I hope I'm wrong about this, but it seems to repeat itself. The next stage after they come after the Jews is that empire falls. And I want nothing more than to be wrong because I love the West. I grew up in the West. The West was great to my family when my grandparents came from Germany. But history does repeat itself. And if learning from history has taught us anything, is that we don't learn from history. So unfortunately, it's not headed in a good direction. But that's why they hate us, because we brought morality to the world. I'm not better than anyone else. My DNA is the same as anyone else's DNA. The difference, though, is that the Jewish heritage and tradition and culture focuses heavily on the family unit, on education, on things that today have become taboo in the West. And that is why we are here and all of those empires are gone. That is why not only are we here, but we're flourishing and thriving as a country. It's because we spent the last 80 years building an incredible country, and our enemies spent the last 80 years trying to destroy a country. And that's it.
Now, I've heard you say that truth is a virtue in much of your public narrative, and your work is about debunking the claims of genocide, apartheid, occupation. And as you said, your audience, many of them are actually not pro-Israeli. So how do you assess the effectiveness of your fact-based approach among people who are already anti-Israel?
It's a fantastic question. First of all, I categorize the internet into three groups. There's our group, as in the pro-Israel group, who doesn't need convincing, but does need reinforcing, does need more information, does need knowledge. Then there's the opposite group, I call them the Heil Hitler folks. No talking to them, they're off the deep end. Then there's the middle group. Now, I don't have the data to back this up, but according to my anecdotal evidence / experience, the middle group is by far the largest group, and that is the people who have integrity and are willing to learn and listen. They could be anti-Israel, but they're willing to have a conversation. That's the group that I'm targeting, and I'm doing it in a very specific way. First of all, I'm not dictating to anyone and telling them they're an idiot if they believe ABC. I'm asking questions. So if you're going to come at me and say that, for example, October 7th happened because of the occupation, meaning the Israelis were occupying Gaza on October 6th. I'm not going to tell you that you're an idiot because there was not a single Jew in Gaza on October 6th. I'm going to ask you, what was the disengagement? I'm going to go, if you have integrity, go Google what the disengagement was. And if you're a person with a brain and integrity, you're going to realize, I never heard of this thing. I'm accusing them of occupying Gaza. They left Gaza in 2005. And if you're coming at me and you're saying that we're committing genocide, then I'm going to ask you, why are we sending in foot soldiers? Why are we sending in aid? What, you think what Israel doesn't have the ability to flatten Gaza? You could do it in an afternoon. October 8th, this war would have been over if you wanted to commit genocide. We're starving Gazans? Really? Do you see how many trucks of humanitarian aid we're sending in? So again, I'm not dictating to anyone. I'm asking questions.
Now, you yourself have been the subject of plenty of persecution since October 7th, as you've been speaking up. You were barred from Australia because they said you were being mean to Islamic people. What was your reaction to that, and what do you think that says about the state of free speech today and political correctness?
So Australia, I was supposed to fly to Australia to speak at a fundraiser at an organization called Magen David Adom, which is basically the Red Cross.
Ambulances, yeah.
That's right. An emergency rescue organization that employs Jews and Arabs and is actually the perfect example of coexistence. And I was supposed to fly out on a Tuesday morning. Friday morning, I got an email from the Australian government saying, we have revoked your visa. They revoked my visa because of what they called Islamophobic and inflammatory tweets. And they included a document of examples of such tweets. One of the tweets that they quoted was me saying that there was no massacre in the humanitarian zone in Gaza. And I tweeted something else, which again, they took as Islamophobic, and I absolutely will push back on that. And I said as follows. I said, phobia, the word phobia has a definition. It's an irrational fear of something. That's what phobia means. Now, if we're talking about a religion that has, let's say, 1.8 to 2 billion members, out of which, let's go with 10. 10% of 1.8 billion people are radicalized. Again, that's according to the Pentagon data. So that's 180 million people dedicated to the destruction of the West and to my death and to your death. Fearing that religion is anything but irrational. It is the most rational thing in the world. So fearing such a religion is anything but irrational. And I wrote, of course, there are millions and millions of happy, modern, peace-loving Muslims, but there are 180 million radicalized Muslims, and the rest of them are silent. So they're irrelevant because, and fearing that religion is anything but irrational. And that's what I wrote. And that was again, perceived as Islamophobic. I don't think it is. But in any case, they banned me. I immediately appealed the decision via the normal official channels.
Another question here, given your background in startups and marketing, how do you see the role of Israel's innovation in shaping Israel's practical defense going forward? Israel, at the beginning of the war, was much more reliant on the United States and other countries for their materiel militarily, and now not so much. They're shifting to kind of doing it more at home. How do you see that AI, security tech, high-tech innovation helping Israel's defense?
So first of all, it's important to mention this is yet another one of those blood libels that our enemies say, which is, why is America sending Israel $3.5 billion of foreign aid? What is this? Why? And I'm going to tell you that personally, Mike Huckabee, Ambassador Mike Huckabee, told me that if anyone's on the receiving end of this relationship, it's not Israel, it's America.
That's right.
What Israel gives America is infinitely more significant than what America gives Israel, let alone the fact that foreign aid can't just be spent on anything. It's spent buying American products. So that's
Most of it is spent in the United States.
That's right. So that's an important point. But when it comes to defense tech, listen, I'm an observant Jew, but I'm a pretty down to earth kind of guy, kumbaya kind of guy, and I'm not a supernatural kind of guy. I'm my feet on the ground. But if you're looking at the events of the last 2 years and you don't see God, then you don't want to see God. We're talking, in my opinion, miracles at the caliber of the splitting of the sea. And I know that sounds like a dramatic statement, but I will back it up in a second. But the reality is that what we're seeing on the side of defense, both, by the way, using tech, but well beyond it. So I'll give you an example. Let's just start first and foremost with the story of how that was invented. So I sat with Dr. Danny Gold, the inventor of the Iron Dome, and I asked him, Dr. Gold, how did you come up with this idea? So he told me that there were rockets raining down on Israel, and he brought the brightest minds in the country into a room. And he said, listen, we got to solve this problem. And everyone came up with ideas, and he said, that's not good enough. I want to detonate the rockets midair. And they said, you want to what? He said, I want to detonate the rockets midair. And they said, you can't, that's impossible. What do you mean? A rocket's in the air for seconds. It's impossible. He said, that's what I want to do. He said, you can't, it's impossible. So he went to the Israeli military, and they told him it's impossible. So he went to the Israeli government, and they told him it's impossible. He went to the State Department. He went to the U.S. military. He went to the world's leading military strategists, and they all told him, sorry, doctor, here we have a system that detonates rockets at over 95% precision. People don't understand what this thing does. You have a rocket flying through the air, and you're firing another rocket at it from the ground and hitting it out of the air. This is miraculous stuff. But it's not just the Iron Dome, because Israel has 3 aerial defense systems. We have 3 aerial defense systems. We have the Iron Dome, which, again, technological wonder. We have the David Sling, which detonates missiles 1 step higher than the Iron Dome. And then we have the Arrow system. The Arrow system detonates ballistic missiles outside of Earth's atmosphere. Think about what's happening right now. You got a ballistic missile flying through the air, and you have a ground unit firing at the missile outside of Earth's atmosphere and detonating it. Each one of these systems are literal miracles. But here's the thing. They were never built to work together. They were independent of each other. Those 2 nights when Iran attacked Israel, 99% precision, 3 systems, each a miracle in and of itself, that were never built to work together, and they work together to perfection. The people who built these systems will be the first to tell you in a million years they never expected it to work that well. So yes, you can explain these are tech systems the same way you can explain that the splitting of the sea was the wind, right? These are miracles. But here's the thing. In last week's Torah portion, there's a verse that you're familiar with that God says, don't say that it's my might and my strength. Always remember that it's God. And we're guilty of that sometimes. Let's not forget something here. The missiles and the rockets and the drones that were not detonated by those systems fell in empty spaces. We hear this all the time. This is a country the size of a fingernail. There are no empty spaces in Israel. These are unexplainable. They're open miracles that we're seeing on a daily basis.
How does it make you feel to see these tens of thousands of Israeli leftists shutting down intersections across Israel and chanting at your government, trying to get the Israeli government to surrender to Hamas?
There's a lot of different angles here. For starters, let's just start with the fact, let's try to be a little positive here for 1 second and remind ourselves that those people who say that Israel's an apartheid state, we have hundreds of thousands of Israelis marching against the government in the streets of Tel Aviv. We have anti-Zionist Arabs in our parliament. That's just important to remember. That being said, Many of these people are my friends. It's a lot of people from the tech world, many of whom I have tremendous love and admiration for. And I know that it comes from a place of compassion. I know they want to see the hostages back. A lot of them genuinely, I think, come from a place of love and compassion. Unfortunately, too many of them come from an obsession, the Netanyahu derangement syndrome, right? We're all familiar with Trump derangement syndrome, Netanyahu derangement syndrome. And I've literally heard them say, some, not all of them, some people say that this was in a TV interview with one of those activists who was asked if you could have all the hostages back or Netanyahu steps down, which one would you choose? Guess what he chose? Not the hostages. It's an obsession. It's a sickness. And we see that because the protests, again, they evolve, right? This guy's fighting an existential war, leading the country better than any politician Israel's ever had, maybe the best politician of our generation. They'll bring him down at all costs. And you know what? I have no problem saying the guy has been in office too long. He was prime minister on October 7th. He should take accountability. I'm fine with that. But suggest an alternative. They don't have an alternative. There is no alternative. There's no one as good as Netanyahu. And I'm not saying he's perfect. To be clear, I didn't even vote for him. I'm not saying he's perfect. But he's a strong leader, and he's withstood pressure that no other politician could withstand, like not going into Rafah, not going into Gaza City, not going into Lebanon. We need a strong leader. And so these people who stand on the streets, not only with their obsession against Netanyahu, but you said before is spot on, which is they are literally empowering Hamas. Because what they're saying is take the deal at all costs, which means Hamas now has leverage, which is insanity. We're fighting an existential war. What are you giving the enemy a gift for?
Let me get to something that is maybe a little uncomfortable for you, and that is I 100% agree with you about the information battle space being the primary battle space now, because I've seen this evolve, especially since I've been covering wars for 23 years now, but especially since the beginning of the war in Ukraine, where the perception, public perception about the war used to be a function of the news that was coming about the kinetic battle space, what was happening on the battlefield. And so they would receive reports, and then that would affect public opinion. Now we're seeing it go the other direction. Public opinion is the primary battle space, and public perception can drive what actually happens on the battlefield. So whether or not Israel goes into Rafah, or whether or not they allow aid or don't allow aid, a lot of that is being driven by the mainstream media, false narratives, propaganda that's being put out by those guys to pressure Israel, levers of power that are being wielded by Hamas against Israel in the information battle space. As you said, Israel has been losing badly in that battle space. And you can definitely point the finger at the mainstream media, but I also point the finger at Israel because I'm a very experienced war correspondent. Christian Broadcasting Network has had a studio in Jerusalem for more than 30 years. We've been supporting Israel very strongly for that entire time. If anybody should be allowed to go into Gaza and embed with the IDF, it should be me. And I have tried and tried every time I go to Israel, and the IDF just won't let me in. Now, my last trip, just 2 weeks ago, I got a call and they said, hey, be in Gaza, be at the border crossing at Kerem Shalom tomorrow afternoon, something like that. And they let us in for 1 hour to see the aid LSA there, which was great. So I finally got into Gaza. But I've been pretty critical of the GPO for shooting themselves in the foot because, as you say, truth is paramount. Truth is a virtue. And I realize that the IDF knows that they're going to get sandbagged by at least half of the journalists that they allow into Gaza because they're anti-Israel. But I think that if you trust that truth will win in the end, by allowing more journalists into Gaza, you are going to get more truth out of Gaza. And as I believe, Israel is doing great work in Gaza and is working harder than any army has ever worked to avoid civilian casualties and that sort of thing in a very hostile environment, then they ought to be doing everything they can to shine a light on that, to counter that narrative. And in so doing, they could at least get closer to winning the information battle space. What's your thoughts?
I agree with you 100%. I spoke to the foreign minister yesterday, and I spoke to his team today, and I basically said to them in not so many words, what the hell are you guys doing? What are you actually doing? Do you have budget? What are you doing? Listen, I don't want to throw them under the bus. They're doing work, but we're not playing the same sport. I don't want to make any promises, but we should talk about this offline. I think what you're saying is spot on. And I think we're not very good storytellers. Let's just say it as it is. In general, I made a whole career out of this.
I mean, they're working hard to put out lots of content that we can use, and that's the excuse I've been given. I've been invited in by the commanders of several IDF units, including a special operations unit. They sent me an invitation, and they said, pending the approval by the GPO, we would love to have you come in bed with our unit. And the GPO said, no, we're not going to do it.
We'll work on that.
Yeah, but the IDF puts out tons of information, but it's coming from the IDF. And so it, by definition, because it's coming from one of the two belligerents, has to be discounted because they're only going to show you what they want you to see. I've been doing this job a long time. I know how to report on combat without telling bad people things they don't need to know, giving away operational security and all that. Of course, I have no problem with the IDF looking at all my footage and approving things before I put them out and stuff like that. That's exactly what I do in Ukraine when I go there. What the sense that I have gotten has been less the sense of we're just worried that we're going to get sandbagged, more the sense of we don't need you. So we've got a few questions from our viewers, and a lot of them have to do with what do you think is Israel's endgame when it comes to actually trying to get the hostages out? Israel has to prioritize their war objectives. You can't say they're all equal. It doesn't work like that.
Because they're mutually exclusive.
So if you have an objective of destroying Hamas and you put releasing the hostages above that, then you're not going to destroy Hamas.
Right.
If you put destroying Hamas at the top, you may not get your hostages back alive. What is Israel's plan there, do you think?
I can only speak on behalf of my opinion and what I do know, but I'm not speaking on behalf of anybody formal or official. But you nailed it. I think so typical Israeli to come up with war objectives that contradict themselves, right? If I'm negotiating with Hamas to get our hostages out, then I can't obliterate Hamas. If I'm obliterating Hamas, I can't get our hostages out, right? But the reality is that I don't really see a scenario in which we go into Gaza City, take over, destroy Hamas completely, and get our hostages back. I don't see that happening, with one exception, and that is God. And this is a situation where I literally bang my head against the wall every day thinking, what are we going to do? How are we going to get out of this? And I just remind myself that I defer to God on this. He's done crazier things. He's done more amazing things than this. That's what he's going to do. I don't know how. I don't know where. We've had miracles. This is going to be another miracle. I cannot, from a military strategy perspective, cannot think of a scenario in which we can both beat Hamas and get our hostages back.
Let's all hope and pray that you are wrong about your predictions, but I think we should prepare and pray as if you are not.